Good evening. I just wanted to do a quick summary of this week's Sedra, Shlach Lecha. This is actually my wife's bat mitzvah, Torah and Haftarah reading. It starts out with a mission whereby 12 spies, really scouts, they represent heads of the 12 tribes of Israel, are ordered by Moses and God to scout out the land of Canaan, which will be their future homeland, gather intelligence, and bring back a report. So they're in the land, traveling throughout for 40 days. They come back with a giant cluster of grapes. It's so big it has to be carried between two men. And they talk about how beautiful the land was, how plentiful it was. It was Eretz Zavat Chalav Udavash, a land flowing with milk and honey. But unfortunately, the people there were giants. They describe them as like NBA stars, so tall. And the spy said, we felt like grasshoppers in comparison. And they tell the people, furthermore, they're so tough and strong in the cities and towns, the villages, they're well fortified and well equipped. It'll be hopeless. We'll never be able to take the land. We're going to die out here in the desert. And the people are thrown into a panic. They hear this and they cry against Moses and Aaron and they say, why did you make us leave Egypt? It would have been better to stay there as slaves than to come out here and die in the desert or risk being killed by these mighty warriors in this land we're supposed to take. There's only two spies, Caleb and Joshua, who say, no, we can take the land. With God supporting us and faith in one another and Moses' support, we can do it. But the people don't believe them. The 10 spies are so convincing. And Moses doesn't know what to do. He falls down on his knees. He cries out to God. And God is so angry and just so incensed that the Israelites would still doubt him after everything, that he wants to wipe them away. And Moses begs on the people's behalf that God shouldn't do that. And God relents, but he says, okay. As a punishment, however, because they don't have faith in themselves and they certainly don't seem to have faith in me, they're going to have to travel now in the desert for not 40 weeks or 40 months, but 40 years until every last elderly person who left Egypt, the people that have the slave mentality, everyone who's over 20 dies out. It's only the younger generation, the people under 20, who don't think of themselves as slaves and have fewer memories of what it was like to be in Egypt. Those are the people, the younger generation, the people I have faith in. The next generation, they'll be able to take the land. And furthermore, 10 of those spies that gave the bad report, I'm going to wipe them out right now. And that's what happens. And that's the reason it took 40 years to travel in the desert until they came to the land of Canaan, which would be our homeland, the land of Israel. It's not because they got lost or they liked traveling around the desert or anything like that. It's because God realized that the older generation that didn't have faith in themselves and in God and in one another really had to fall by the wayside. And at the end of this parsha, we actually read the third paragraph of the Shema, where it talks about the tzitzit, right? The fringes of your talit, and how you should look at them and be reminded of your connection to God and have faith. V'lo taturu acharei levavchem ve'acharei einechem. You shouldn't be led astray by your heart or by your eyes, because sometimes our eyes can deceive us. It's one of the reasons, by the way, when we say the Shema, we cover our eyes, right? We shouldn't be distracted. Sometimes what we see isn't always real, right? And sometimes what matters most is not the physical, but the eternal, what's inside of us. And we forget that sometimes. That's sometimes also why a blind person can have a heightened sense of smell or hearing, because they're so much more perceptive, right? Like I said, our eyes sometimes trick us, and we see illusions. The people didn't realize that even though there were giants in the land of Canaan, they could still take them, right? They had strengths that perhaps stronger, well-armed people didn't have. And sometimes we forget to have faith in ourselves because we're so duped by what we see. In the Haftarah, the selection from the Book of Prophets, it's another story of spies. It's 40 years later, and Joshua has led the people into Canaan, and the first big city is known as Jericho. Not Jericho here, but Jericho, which today is in the West Bank. It's surrounded by a mighty wall. And Joshua sends 2 spies into Jericho to gain intelligence about the land. And they're recognized by a woman named Rachav, who lives right near the wall itself. And she says, look, I know why you're here. I know you're spies for Joshua and for the land of Israel, for the people of Israel. I know you're going to take the land. I have faith in you and I have faith in God. All I ask is that when you come back in here and you conquer the city, spare me and my household. So they tell her to hang a red thread, a crimson thread from her window. And when they soon come back in to conquer the city, they'll spare her and everyone in her household, because she hid them from the king and from all the soldiers of Jericho that were looking for the spies. And sure enough, that's what happens. Jericho is the first major conquest of the Israelites. They actually have to march around it because it has such mighty walls, and they march for 7 times until the walls themselves come crumbling down and they're able to then storm in. But again, it shows you that the Israelites had to have faith. They had to have faith in their leaders, they had to have faith in God, and they had to have faith in one another that they could make Canaan their homeland. And Israel today, I'm glad to say, is our homeland. Sometimes what's internal inside of us is eternal, right? Who we are, that's what matters most, not always how we appear. That's why we're always told you can't judge a book by its cover. Hope everyone has a great week and a great summer. Stay safe and stay healthy. And I hope you enjoy my Sedra summary.